Hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner. It's lovely to see you again. Well, you know what I mean when I say see. It's lovely to be with you again, perhaps would be a better way. I've been missing for quite a while. It's a long story. Over the past year and a half, I have been struggling with my energy levels, with various health issues, with the perimenopause on top of all of that. And then just a few weeks ago, my main computer died on me. And so it was a crazy time because I had a book contract due. So to get a digital tablet, because I've got a more or less brand new laptop I didn't really make much use of. So luckily I had a backup. I'd lost some files and I've still got to find somebody who can try to recover things from my hard drive, which is what seems to have failed. But everything's up and running. I'm feeling a lot better with energy, though I still tire very quickly when I'm with people, but that's a function of me, full stop. The book is finished. I've had a couple of weeks now of peace and quiet. And I did actually make a video at the weekend, but it was 2 hours long and it just wouldn't upload to YouTube for whatever reason. So rather than get frustrated trying and trying again or editing it, I thought, right, let's come back and just start over. But the answer is I'm feeling better bit by bit. As I start to talk to you, I suddenly feel very tired, which is a sign that most probably I'm actually quite stressed about doing this. But let's see where we go. So I don't remember, and I'm not going to look back at what I started a while ago, because I will completely get frazzled by the idea. So I'm going to start with something quite nicely, I suppose, simple in its way. What I've got here is a piece of mixed media paper from my Ohuhu mixed media sketchbook. It's a 10 by 7 sketchbook. And I'm just going to draw using my T-square ruler, which is great for making lines that are parallel to the edges of paper. Just like this. Roughly a squarish shape. And I'm actually going to put a smaller area at the end, which I'll use for notes, because sometimes things like this, oops, come on Angela, hold this still, and do this, girl. Sometimes I like to add notes. I keep turning away from you, I'm so sorry about that. I like to add notes about what I've done, what I like, what I don't like, especially as I'm going to be adding some watercolour and some shading to my drawing, I think. And I'm just going to start off with using an 05, this is a Unipin pen from Uniball, it's a fineliner pen. It's got pigment ink in it, and it will also help if I put some glasses on. Glasses are always very useful. So I'm just going to start somewhere around here, about thirds of the way in and a third of the way down. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just going to draw a wobbly kind of circle, because if you draw things that are deliberately wobbly, you don't get stressed about making them perfectly circular. And the wobbles are your own kind of signature as well. I've chosen mine that's really quite wobbly, but I could have chosen spikely bits or other kinds of things. Now I'm going to go back and add things to this. My next job is I'm just going to add a border inside this. And then I'm going to add another area inside, which I'm not sure I'm going to add a border to. My next job, or my next idea as I'm working here, because I do work based on what I've done, I decided I wanted to start with this wobbly shape, but I don't know where this is going to lead. But what I'm going to do is on these edges where I've got these little cuts out, I'm just going to add some little shapes that look like we've got little things that are perhaps growing in and out, and I'm going to do the same around this one. So I'll have one that pops inside like that, just for, perhaps I'll do one there just to make that, just because I can really. And in the centre I'm going to fill this, and I'm going to choose a smaller pen. I think I'm going to choose an 03. as long as the point's half decent. No guarantee with me and my pens. Where I am just going to fill this in with tiny circles, filling in all the black around them, and here and there, or just starting to make them bigger the further away from the border we are, just to add variation in the appearance of saturation. I am going to try to keep my hand out of the way, but I'm not sure whether I'll manage that. That one wasn't very circular, but I'm not too worried. Again, it's all about variation in size and the density of ink. The smaller they are, the more dense the ink is and the darker the area looks. So it will look more like it's in shadow, whereas around the middle, I really want to have larger areas. There seems to be more light. Again, they don't have to be perfectly spaced. It doesn't have to be a wonderfully symmetrical arrangement. It's just about adding some texture and differences in saturation of ink, the amount of ink, to give the variations in tones and that feeling of light and dark. I could fill in the edges with black or thicken them with black, but I don't really want to today. I just want to use this to do something with them. So that's my central piece. And it does look like this is a little bit domed up, but I'll enhance that when I come back to do some shading. And what I do want to do though, is I'm going to take my pencil. This is an 05 Tombow Mono mechanical pencil, 0.5, 05, 0.5, and I've put an F grade lead in it. The F grade is harder than an HB or a number 2 pencil, but a teeny bit softer than an H. So it gives quite fine lines that you can barely see if you have a light hand, which is what I'm doing here. Hopefully you can make that out. I know you'll want me to zoom in for this, so we'll do that. And here, and perhaps again, because I can get really close up. So here what I'm going to do, I'll try and keep my hand out the way, is I'm going to draw a line that goes from the pencil line to the edge. At the edge I'm going to add a V shape, and I'm going to try and do this fairly evenly or not, because it doesn't really matter. If I make some a little bit closer and some a little bit wider, I'm really not worried about it. But that diamond shape, or the V shape, sorry, the triangular shape at the end, again adds more ink density. So it seems to give a sense of shadowing or being further away or dipping away. Now, if I'd wanted to, I could have enhanced this sort of like optical illusion almost, this suggestion that we've got a curvature here instead of rather a flat piece, just by curving the lines, and they may actually do that naturally a little bit here and there, because they are hand drawn after all, and we're not looking for perfection. Although I know there are artists that do, you know, think about the amazing artists that do photorealistic work or do these amazing pencil drawings that could almost be a black and white photo as well. Just in awe. But I've always liked playing with light and shadow, highlight and darkness, to give that illusion of volume, of a three-dimensional quality to my work. And just by adding a little bit more ink, it can do that. Now the bonus of doing this is it's almost like I've got petals now. You can see as these lines are, or the triangles are sort of joining together, it's almost like I'm creating little petals here. And I'm fine with that. It's not meant to be a flower, but I'm using them more for that feeling of dimensionality than I am creating a flower. But it's another way to create a flower in a space. that's what you'd like to do. So while I've been away from YouTube, I've had a lot of time to rest. I sleep about 9 to 10 hours a night at the moment, which is good. It's a lot. Not used to it, but it does mean that it gives me more energy. And if I've been draining myself socially, I may sleep longer, and it may take me a couple of days to recover from that. But I'm learning how to take a bit more care of myself in that respect. I also worked out that the best way for me to work with my publishers is to get them to create a... Oh gosh, did I go off camera? Oh, I'm so sorry. See, talking, drawing, and observing what I'm doing. All I've done is repeat those first steps all the way round. And you can see how these now look a little bit like petals, but I've also got that feeling of shadow around the edge, as if this is dipping away or is overshadowed by these top areas. And these little bits here, I'm just going to add some tiny fine lines in, just to add again some shading. Trying to get 3 into each one of them, just to add some interest. In my mind, it's like having little holes, perhaps in whatever this is made out of, and that may just be rock or stone or something else. And perhaps there's a surreal flower captured in there. So I will zoom out, because I obviously have an inability to keep things in the middle of the frame. I do apologise. If I'd had common sense, I'd have recorded this and voiced over perhaps, but my brain just can't cope with that. It really can't. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to look here, and I'm going to do some interesting shapes. Just coming off at an angle. So instead of sort of like semicircular, I'm using these shapes which are very kind of long and thin in this kind of way. But I'm not going to go round this all the way. I'm not going to make them go off, sort of perpendicular to my, 90 degrees to this centre piece at right angles to it. I'm just going to nest them as I see fit to make an interesting arrangement. So I'm going to add one here as well. So I'm making the centre one dark because it will help to pick them out, each individual one of these, when they perhaps get denser. Perhaps, yeah, I'll have one that might perhaps grows towards this one. Why not? See what happens. So let me just try and keep my hand out the way for you, because I know that people get irritated if my hand covers up what I'm drawing. But I'm so used to drawing like this, that's how I hold my pen normally. Holding it like this is quite awkward for me and unnatural, and the pen doesn't work quite the same way as I'm used to. Hey ho, let's see how it works. So I'm going to go here. We'll end up with quite a higgledy-piggledy arrangement, I think, which actually makes me smile in some way. Because again, it's freeing yourself up from having it absolutely perfect. Now those two actually at the exact same angle. I didn't plan that one. That's just how it happened. And that's fine. It's whatever comes from wherever we're working. Now I'm going to add one, comes out at a completely different angle here. I'll just move that up, and let's keep my hand further up the pen, because that stops me from putting my hand and pen in the way. It's too much. So like so. And then I could do with some So that's an interesting one. It's going off at a very slightly different angle, but it'll be enough to add some interest there. What I'm going to do now is, where these places look a bit too big, I'm just going to put something in between them, maybe at a slightly different angle, maybe that it butts up to one of them or both of them, but just fill this area in one way or another, just to give a smoother edge. Not comfortable with it as it is. It makes me feel it's unfinished, but come on, pen. Grip the pen further up the barrel, like so, and like so. And then one here, which is at a funny old angle, but I can live with that. And perhaps I could have one here, but very gently, just seems to connect this. And perhaps a small one here, see what happens here, because I may need another one. Keep sliding my fingers down the pen, sorry. Such an unnatural place for me to hold this. So that actually appeals to me, though I think I could do with one perhaps here, maybe one that just fits in here, like so. You might do that there, just have a smallish one that just fills that funny little gap in. Perhaps some along here, because we're getting now to where we're getting those odd shapes or odd connections again, in my mind. They just feel awkward to me. It's the only way I can describe it. When I look at them, I think, that looks awkward, or I need to do something. So that's a bit better. I mean, it's not exactly what I would have done, but it's what's come out from my pen today. I'm not going to repeat any of this around, but what I am going to do is just add another couple of rounds to this one here. And again, I'm just going to go back and add some of these areas where there are some little gaps. And again, I'm going to take my O1 pen and I'm just going to fill them in whatever direction I feel the lines need to go. Just to add that feeling that they've been chipped away and perhaps there's holes around the edge, some kind or other. So that's how far I've got now then. My aim here today, as I'm working on this, or one of my aims, is to try to keep some open space. And you'll understand why afterwards, but I also don't want this just floating in the middle of the page. So I'm going to add lines that will both tether this to the page, but will give me opportunities for more patterns. So I've drawn kind of a backwards S shape here, backwards S letter. And then I'm going to start just adding some lines here that repeat this line both from that side but also on this side. What I've done here is I've joined this one a little bit further down the original line and drawn a curve there, and then I'm starting to work up the line of this curve, create more lines, and as I get to the end I'm going to have them bend backwards towards the original origin of the line, so it becomes more this lovely curved shape. This one needs just a few more. Again, I may just start to curve this around a little bit and just add that there. And that really does feel like it's tethering this together, or tethering this to the bottom of the area I'm working within. So it's not really floating. Now I could, in principle, carry on doing these here, and I might do just a few here, just to suggest that this too may continue on. And as I'm doing this, I'm also thickening that line, and I'm making the junctions where the lines all come together that little bit smoother. It might be lumpy smooth, but it's just smoothing out where my lines have joined, just to give a nicer edge to it. And I'm quite happy with that. If anything, I might want to go like that there, and then perhaps a little bit in that way here, just to give it that feeling that it's well rooted. And just going back around there. That extra ink just thickens that line and makes it more dominant. And I'm just going to do the same here, just to bring out this original motif, both around the outside layer. And I'm not worrying about where light and shadow would be coming from, because I'm going to make shadows really the part of the pattern, rather than something that is that little bit different or three-dimensional. We'll see how that goes, because I did say I'm going to add shadow as well to this drawing. This is like some very weird alien plant at the moment. And what that has done as well, I think, very subtly has separated this top layer away from this one that's underneath as well. It's very subtle, but it's there. The other thing I'd like to do is I am going to draw the corner in here, just for now. In fact, I'm going to do the whole of the square while I'm at it. And again, because I'm drawing this freehand, I find ruler lines are just, it's like using rulers to draw pictures, just makes them feel just that little bit too perfect and a little bit less me. Although I'm quite happy for you to follow along with me, I'm more than happy if you decide to make changes or think, oh, this is how it works for me. You're never going to be able to copy this exactly. What I'd like you to bear in mind is that we're all different. The way we draw lines, the way we put things together is unique to us, because our musculature and bones and ligaments, tendons, and the way our brain links with things is all different. What we see is different. I just seem to have this ability to draw quite smooth lines, and yet I go out of my way to make them all a bit wibbly at times. And that's something I've developed in the past year or so, where I've thought, I really like this because it gives that human touch. Perhaps it's the influence of seeing so much AI art around and other art that is just so perfect in line, but I quite like this kind of line. And I also found it when the last book, I sketched the designs out for the pages and then scan them in so I could ink them in digitally and make the changes requested. But part of me wants to work in pen going forward, as it's that human form. When things are done digitally, it's wonderful. It's easy to alter and change, but I lose part of me no matter how hard I try to set the pens up. Don't get me wrong, I love digital art, but I'm definitely veering along the lines of digital, where I draw my designs on paper, scan them in, and then add colour or shading or anything else to them digitally, because I know that's where colour lets me down. But I think it's really important for you to be you and to express you, because each of us are unique. Our life stories, the stories we have to tell, whether it's in words or whether it's through art or through music or through anything else in our lives, cooking, gardening, they're all unique to us. You might not think so, but they are. Our colour choices are unique to us, and boy, do I make some big mistakes. I think, oh, those would be nice together, and I put them and I think, should have tested that out first, Angela, and do I ever learn? No, the answer is no. But be you. Take what you like from this. Try it. Draw with me. Then take what you've drawn and pick out the bits you like and then develop something new yourself. You don't like something I've done? Fine. Leave it out. Add your own thing. Make it yours. It's so important in an age where we seem to be losing that individuality of artistic expression for the lure of artificial intelligence, AI art, which hasn't got the emotions, the memories, the stories that you have to put into your art. What makes your hand happy to draw lines? What makes you happy when you put certain elements together? What makes you happy when it comes to colour and shading? It's you. And yes, I'm not happy about AI art. And there's a very good chance I'm going to close down some of my Facebook page, certainly, and my Instagram account, and delete all my artwork, because Meta is planning to use everything that's been posted on these platforms to train AI on. And I don't want that. I don't want my art used that way. And I really do believe that that human personal touch is the most important thing that comes to art. Even when you look at the great art masters and so on, you see all the wibbly wobbly bits close up. You see the things that aren't exactly perfect. But when you stand back, it all looks coherent and beautiful and a wonderful thing to do. And sometimes their strokes and shapes are very rudimentary in their way, quite, not as clear and clean as you think. I mean, if I zoom in on this, you'll see how the slight wobbliness and the unevenness of my lines is. But looking at it from a distance, it looks all together. And that's why it's important to step back from your work, to look at it from a distance rather than focusing on all the little bits in between. And it might get to a point where you think, what on earth am I doing? What am I doing here? I mean, I'm beginning to think that here. What am I doing here? This looks bizarre. But I've learnt that I've got choices. I can either carry on or I can put it to one side for a while, which might be a couple of hours, it might be a day or so, it might be a bit longer, and then come back to it and finish it because it will look different to me after that break. My mind will process it in a different way, or will come up with ideas for me to add, or will know what to do. Same when it comes to adding colour and shading. You can leave it partway through because I think, what have I done? But I learn to push on through it and see what happens afterwards. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So by all means, use other people's work as inspiration. Follow what they've done. Work out how they did it, because that's how all artists learn. We all study other artists in our early days. I did it while I was doing my AS and A-level art at the age of 40 odd. 20 years ago now, because we did have to study and produce work based on other artists' work in our sketchbooks and so on, as a way of understanding how different art styles work. I loved working with Wang Gri, a cubist. His work made sense to me. He used a lot of collage and so on, and I was fascinated by it. Ernst Haeckel has stayed with me, as has Escher. I think Escher's one of the big defining things in my life, along with the amazing album covers of prog rock and rock bands in the late 60s, 70s and so on, with the works of Roger Dean and the other one I love, Rodney Matthews, and just blew me away. And there are others that did. And that tends to stay in my mind. There's things that I really liked, and this was before the days of digital art, but they were perfect in how they were created. But they were created much bigger than the album cover they were on, so that when you shrink it down, all of those little imperfections disappear, and that needs to be remembered. So do you learn, explore, experiment? Don't be afraid to try new things, and just be who you are and be proud of the lines you make, because nobody else will make those lines and shapes and forms in the way that you do. They're unique to you, and that is what I love to see in artwork. There are many people working in similar styles, but with familiarity you can tell one from another, whether it's from their colour choices, the way they use textural patterns or lines or shading, shadow, the compositions. You can work out who it is because it's theirs. So never be afraid of being you. There. That's my inspirational chat for today, and I hope it made sense. So, okay, with this, I still need to tether this because it's floating away here and I've got spaces. Now, I love things like I'm going to add some straightish lines now for some contrast with all of the wibbly-wobbliness of this. By wibbly-wobbliness, I mean the curvy lines, because although there's some straight lines here, there's not that many. Most of it resolves itself into a curved shape. And one of the things I love are kinds of columns. I don't know why. Well, I do, I think. It's my love of Romanesque Gothic architecture and anything really that's quite architectural. You might even take me to Mesoamerican, Egyptian, all kinds of things where there are columns. And I just love it. And I like the contrast of one to another. I mean, this does seem quite an alien life form or alien something. So my columns are going to be that little bit different, I think. But I'm just drawing lines that I like to draw and just seeing what happens. And this looks almost like a tulip leaf now, doesn't it? And I like to put spacers between each element just to separate it out and help people to make sense of it, I think. Don't worry, I'm not putting any heads in this at all. My Mesoamerican heads that appear so often, it's very tempting, but I'm not. So I've got the base of this column, and I am going in and adding extra ink to places where I want them to feel separate and dimensional. This is such a lovely shape here. I'm just going to echo it further up the column and leave you to wonder what's underneath, what's hidden by my frame here. This one is quite uninteresting, but I'll do something about that later on, maybe. See how it goes. Let me just get the shading in where I need it. Just tidying lines up. And at the top, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm sort of imagining a line here. Now, these wouldn't necessarily find their way onto the top of a column because they seem to be bending towards the centre, but I don't know what's on the other side at the centre. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop rounded triangular points on them. This one here begs for something like that, just to finish it off, something to hold it up, something solid. And then I'm going to use my pencil. Pencils are magic, and they give me that guideline in the middle I really want to make use of. And this is where I switch to a finer pen, and I am going to switch to my 03, and I'm going to draw shape down like that, and I'm going to follow these chevrons, these zigzag lines. All the way down. And I'm not drawing that central line in. I'm just going to let the points of the chevrons make it feel that there's something there. At the top, I am going to put an upside down V, like that, and maybe another one, like so. And I now want to colour this in to suggest that this is, it's almost like there's a hole going down the middle of this. Now I've got this one here, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to carry on in that section, those chevron shapes. And now I've got a column that has a top to it, but I do want to add more. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to borrow a kind of muka in the Zentangle world. Now this one's interesting because it's going to go off under the page a little bit, but that's fine, I can live with that. And again, I just want to make some kind of statement here that we've got dimensionality. So I'm just going to thicken some of these lines underneath as well, and that works. Part of me wants to put something here, but I don't know what. And at the top, for this one, again, I'm just going to add this central kind of line with my pencil and go back with the 03 and do the same kind of thing that I did below. And then here, and just add ink to that little bit there. Not sure what I do here because I would imagine there might be another one coming across and touching here. So here I would be tempted to actually do something similar, but perhaps not. Oh, wrong size, but that's okay. Going all the way to the top, as if that part is hidden behind there. And I could do the same here really, because what I can do here is just take that there, and I'm going to add another one of these like I did underneath here. You see I've repeated this to this, and then I'm going to do the same here where I'm going to take the top here and I'm going to try my best. So here I'm going to give myself this, but I'm also going to try to keep the spacing very similar here to the other side. I've got a bigger gap here, so I'm going to just add another one in and hope that nobody notices. The other thing I think I'm going to do is just fill this in with that darkness, because it might suggest that, excuse me, it will help to suggest there's something behind here. And the other thing I'd like to do, do I? Yeah, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fill these sections in with some cross hatching. But I'm not drawing complete lines, I'm drawing broken lines. So there's some texture in them. But it just darkens that bit and just helps that to stand out. I might go back across at 90 degrees with these because that would make sense to me. And it does. And there we go. How about that? So that is now touching this. It's almost like this is stopping it from falling over. So it's bowling over that way. But I'd still like something else that perhaps would come, perhaps something that would come from here. I've got this shape here, and I think I might like to make use of that area just to add something in here. And as I am very fond of seed pods, let's create one that may be growing here. Now, then I'm going to just add some darkness to the lines that would be at the bottom here, but this one I'm going to do inside, and then here as well. See how this one isn't perfect? Am I worried? Not one bit. And around there, just to delineate these as well. That one might need a little bit extra, as it was looking a bit spindly and weak. I'm just going to make sure they all sort of join up just by rounding the bottoms together, or the bottoms of these there, as if they all come together and go underneath. Now I've got my O3 still, and in this section here I want to put some seeds. So I'm going to make the seeds circular and to fill this space, but I'm not going to have the circles drawn one on top of each other as if I'd drawn one there. I'm going to take the sides here where I can just start to draw them in, partly circular. Try and move my hand out of the way for you, that'd be useful. Now this is too small for me to be comfortable putting a seed in. I'm going to do that, but I do want to give these the feeling of some kind of shading on them, but in ink. And the way I like to do that is got my paper, so to my hand it's sort of like vertical, how my hand's working. But I'm going to draw two circular lines that are getting smaller in there, and just a dot for the third one really, or a tiny line. The smaller they get, fewer of these I can get in, but the idea is then that automatically gives that feeling of dimension. And I can do that with some of the bigger ones in here as well. Just go in and just add that tiny little bit of ink, and suddenly that creates dimensionality. Just going back where there's nothing there. And with this, I also want to, excuse the pops of my pen, but I also want to give a bit of a lip around this area that's open, where the seeds can be seen, almost like it's opened. It's very perfect. In hindsight, perhaps I could have done that more in a sort of like imperfect edge, but it is what it is now. Then what I want to do here is I'm trying to think, where would the bulge be, the biggest bulge? You know, where would it be bulging out the most here? And I think around here, so I'm going to put some lines in here going down, and then I'm going to start by curving them upwards, just like so. The top, it doesn't matter too much. And again here, this is where the biggest part of that bulginess is going to be. And what I'm trying to do is to get the lines to go closer together the further away this would be. Again, to add shadow. So that feeling that there's more ink, so therefore this is further away and more in the shadow. And here, that big area is a kind of highlight, and it's a clue to how far apart our lines need to be, which is what I've just started to figure out here. But that's okay, because they'll all work together no matter what. And of course in this section I've got a lot more space to work with than in the others. So again here, This space is so small, I'm not worrying about that variation in size particularly. If you're not sure where to put the highlight, just pick somewhere and make it consistent with each section almost. You could also draw sort of the shape you want for this, the contour lines. I'll show you quickly how to do that. And pencil, hopefully you'll be able to see it. So there, I've got that sense of something happening here. So that is as much drawing as I want to do now. I don't feel that I want to add anything anywhere else. Let me show you what I mean about the, I'll do it on this section. See, I knew there was a reason why. So if this is my seed pod, it has got less lines than this one, but the principles are the same. So what I want to do is to think about where this would be curved. And I'm drawing lines on like a net, almost, just to help me with that. And then I can focus on these areas as being the ones where I've got the greatest number of lines, or the least number of lines, and then the greatest number as we go farther away. And then this one, like so. And then we'll have our highlight all the way along, really, following the contours, as it were. That's how I think of it, if that makes any sense. Okay, so if you just give me a mo, turning around. Okay, 2 bits, because I do want, I've got an eraser here. Oh, I bought new ones because I can't find anything still. But let's have a look. That's on, open here it says, so there we go. Ugh. No there. And then I've got, this is a kneadable eraser. This is what they look like when they're brand new. They're quite a pale grey colour, but all of mine are getting quite dark, almost black, which is telling me that they're nearly done with. So I'm just going to erase this here. And kneadable means, yes, I can knead it into a shape, but I'm also going to take the pencil lines off I put on my drawing here, because I'm going to add shading with a pencil and a tortillion. Yes, you heard me right. And if you've been here before, if you know me well, you know that me and pencils are not always the best of friends, but I'm beginning to understand a little bit more about this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a little bit of pencil from a graphite pencil. This is a 4B. So I'm just going to add some here, just to add shading underneath here. Now 4B is quite a soft graphite pencil, and also quite a dark one, because the greater the B numbers, the softer the pencil is, the more graphite and the less clay it's got, and the darker it will be because there's more graphite in it. So I'm carefully adding just a small amount of graphite where I want the shadows, and then I'm using my tortillion to get that worked into the paper, but also to spread it into areas where I want shadows as well, lighter shadows. I'm trying to leave a nice bright area there. Now these areas where I'm adding shadow, I'm going to do all of this because this is all basically the same. I'm going to put shadow on the edge as well, but on the underneath these lines, and then to the left. In places I'm just going to put it along the bottom, along the right, like so. And then I can just add that shadow in where I want it to be. And I don't want this to spread too far because I want those nice bright highlights still. But the wonderful thing is that if you do spread it too far, you should be able to remove most of it with an eraser. So I'm trying to leave most areas quite bright. I want shadows where the edge of my frame is, as if, no, this frame is casting shadows as well. So that has automatically given it some dimension without any colour. Now for this one, I'm going to put shading along the right-hand side of each line and the right-hand sides here. I will come back and see if I want to put them on the other side, or if I do, I may just want to use a little bit of graphite, and then I've used what graphite I've got on my tortillion just to add a little bit of shadow, which I'll show you in a mo. Which you can hopefully see just to this side and this side of that little space there. And I want up to the centre part of this, where the little V points are, to be shaded, and then just a little bit of shade there. So it's trying to think that light's coming from the left. Do the same here, just pull that up towards that centre. Doesn't have to go exactly there, going a little bit there. And with this, the remaining bits, I'm going to add some shade there, perhaps a little bit at the top, just there. This one around here and inside there. Around here, there's going to be some shading there and there. And let's see how this works. A little bit there, and a little bit there. A little bit in there. A little bit there. So whatever I do to one sort of like element of a pattern, I do to each and every element of that pattern. So again, that's now added a lot more dimension to that area. So I've just got these little 3 ones to do. So again, I'm doing it very much the same as I've done the others. So underneath at the top, just to bring some shading in. Got a lot of shading there, so out comes the new eraser, because I can. I'm going to need this, so I've got the lovely thing about this is it's very soft, it's very pliable, and you can just get really fine shapes. And I just only need to very gently use it, and I can erase some of this graphite in places where I don't want it. It's great if the graphite smudges as well with your hand. Okay, so done all of that. Here I am going to want shading at the bottom here and here, there, but also under here. Now I'm not worried about putting the graphite on neatly because the tortillion will spread this out. I do need shadow there, but I also need the shadow along the edge here. Perhaps there. And the tortillion then is what you use to guide this to where you'd like it to be. So it will smudge it out into a certain area, and I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit, just to increase where that shadow is a little bit. Under here I've got quite a lot of shadow, and that's where I really want to keep it, but I do want to soften the edge. And then here, and there's that feeling of curvature there, which I'd like to bring out just a little bit more because I got too stuck in my ways there. Perhaps just a little bit round here just to help to bring that highlight out. And then we're beginning to get some real dimension going on now. Okay, this is going to be interesting because here I'm going to put shadow at the base of these petals, but I'm not going to bring it down towards the centre. I'm going to move that where the petals are. It's almost creating its own little raised area here around that central bit, but without the use of a solid line, just with some shading, which I love. And if I really wanted to, which I'm going to do with just the graphite that is on my tortillion, I'm going to add a little bit of shading at the tips of these and leaving a bright centre so it looks like they fold up and down, hopefully. That's my aim. Right, where am I? Okay, what about these other sections? Well, I'm going to add shading where things underlie one another. Perhaps a little bit in each of these, just to bring that shadow out, maybe. There. So I've put some graphite here where these lines go underneath the ones there. Then in other places I've put some graphite in these areas that will be, I want them shaded because I want them to look like something's been nibbled out of these layers, as it were. So here there's that shading. And I don't want to put any more shading unless I really on this, because I feel it's okay as it is. But here the shading's going to go at the bottoms of each of these arced sections. Trying not to get it on the black areas, but if it does, hey ho, it is what it is. So don't worry too much. If it dulls the black down or it makes the black too shiny, then erase. There are no police for shading and adding ink and colour and so on. It's just whatever you want to do. It's your expression of you. I mean, I'm beginning to like this idea of using graphite to shade or to add texture and pattern to. Starting to do that in some of my own personal work, which I haven't shown you much of because there's been a fair bit, but that would be a 2-hour show and tell, really. Well, no, it wouldn't, but you'd like to see what I've been up to because I haven't been posting much on social media either. It's something I need to do. I'm trying to get my head round what parts of my social media would be most useful for me in terms of sharing art or not sharing art, or it's getting really difficult to know what to do because I don't like the way that people just think they can use your art for profit and so on. It's a whole different story as well. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's copyright free and you can do what the heck you like with it. It's not. There's intellectual property rights apply always, even to your own personal photographs. Bet you didn't. Did you know that? So nobody should be using them without your permission, and they should credit you with it. Okay, just a bit of graphite on the bottom areas, just to darken them just that little bit, as if they're lower down. Just a bit, tiny bit, and that helps that top one to stand out. Here again, it's going to be shading at the bottom and at the top, so I'm just going to add graphite and I'm going to use the magic of the tortillion just to bring that down. Here was me hoping for a half-hour video. It's an hour. Should know better. And then here I'm just going to add what graphite is on my tortillion to these where the little shadows are, just to help to bring the shadowing out a little bit and the shapes out. I will just add a little bit to the whiter areas, but I don't want it as dark as the rest. Now, the only thing I need to do now is I'm going to add shadow underneath all of my elements here to lift them off the paper. But I'm thinking here about how I'm going to do that, and I'm very tempted to stick to my left and bottom principle for this, because it will make more sense that way for me, and more sense in terms of how this would cast a shadow just. So I'm not going all the way round, although I am going to add shadows on the side of this one, because I think they would be in shadow for whatever reason. So let's see how this gets us now. And as always, I'm using not too much graphite, because although I can erase it, I prefer to get the intensity right the first time I do it, or be able to add just a little bit more where I need a little bit more. So I'm going gently and lightly to begin with. And with this, I do want the shadow to creep out as if this is floating above the paper. So I'm using both straight and rounded movements of my tortillion just to help this become quite even at the edge. And as I go further away, I'm using less and less pressure to help less and less graphite be put down. But if I haven't left a big enough area, or the shading isn't working because it's too dark in places, I have my eraser. Erasers are magic. I understand why erasers aren't used in the Zentangle method, because it's to encourage you not to be scared of making mistakes. But there are times when they really are useful, because all of us do things that we might not be happy with, or want to change the shape of a line if we're drawing in pencil. And that's where erasers come in. They allow us to pull back from those things that aren't working and keep what is working and try again, especially in sketches, as I do a lot of sketching nowadays before I start drawing, sort of, in my colouring book illustrations. I certainly do. I think we're good to go here. I think we are. I'm just going to add some shading down this side as well, just to lift that up. There would be shading here, I think, just a bit. So I am going to just go back and just add some graphite along here. I'm not going all the way up to the line, do you notice? Is that, as I know I can push the graphite upwards towards that line, blend it out, because, you know, that's the beauty of graphite, especially when you've got a softer graphite like this. The downside of using a softer graphite pencil like a 4B is that it will spread and spread and spread and spread. But that's fine. So I'm just going to clean up the areas that I want highlighted. This one actually needs that little bit more shading going up around here, I think. This one a little bit. That's fine, though got a little bit of spillage, because remember these ones, I want those nice and white. Everything else I think is fine. So the only thing I want to do now is quickly enough, or fairly quickly, is just to add some watercolour. And I have got watercolours here. And I will zoom out. I'm looking for the brush I want, which is that one. You can go in. Thank you. Just need a piece of tissue paper, which I have here, so I can pick this up. The brush I'm using is by Artwyrd. I think it's a crow quill brush. It's made out of synthetic like sable hair, completely synthetic, and it's absolutely fantastic. I am going to use a beautiful turquoise, which you will see if I move this over. Sort of turquoisey colour here. And this crow quill comes to a lovely point, and the brush holds so much watercolour. I'm glad I discovered them, especially as they're synthetic and not real sable. I'm not a fan of animal things being used for brushes when synthetics work just as well, but that's just me. I don't want any animal to be harmed for my art. So now this is mixed media paper, so I should have wet this paper before I started adding colour to get a smoother gradient, so I'll remember that next time, and that's going to be a note I write to myself. And make sure I wet the area to get smooth gradients. That's what I want to do here, so I am just going to wet this and let the paint hopefully just blend itself into that area. And perhaps plenty of water, we might get some smoothing out. The lovely thing is I can always come back and add more colour, like along the edge here, just to help to blend that in just that little bit more. I'm not going to overwork this because it is watercolour paper. I just want a wash of colour which will help to bring things behind. And I do want it to be darker in areas and lighter. I want some interest there. I don't want it necessarily perfect because, as I said, art isn't, I'm not perfect with watercolours. I'm just using it as a way to add just put a wash in here of water so that the paper's damp, hopefully. The fact I've got some colour in it is helpful to me because I can see where I'm putting it, whereas with plain clean water I wouldn't. But this works. You might see that you're wondering why have I put graphite there when I'm going to have watercolour? It's because the graphite adds shading to the colour. So if I did do just a flat coloured wash, we'd still have shading and highlights. And the graphite will show through even in the darker coloured areas because watercolours are translucent so that you can see through them, or transparent depending on the quality and type. So you can still see the graphite shading. You can see that as I'm adding the water, its magic is happening where the colour is just blooming out. I say adding more water, I meant adding more colour. And I can do that right along the edges and just let all of this just do what it needs to do, which is fabulous. And I am adding dots of the colour here and there just to bring in some extra interest in places. Let it bloom and do what it needs to do, because this is the magical watercolour. I could use different colours, but I've chosen not to. I'm just using this. And this only happens because the paper is still just that little bit damp. If I let it dry a little bit more, the colours won't blend into one, or the dots won't blend into each other as much. But it's another way to add extra colour and texture and pattern into this area even. I do want to get into those little areas where there's not as much ink, where I need ink watercolour as I need the watercolour to be. That's not too bad, it's not too shabby. I'll come back and do something about this area where I've got that strong line because I forgot I needed to damp the paper that little bit. So I'm going to do the same here, where I'm going to start by giving a wash of water to this. Yes, it's coloured, but I'm fine with that because, as I've said, I can see where it belongs, where I've gone, and can make sure I've got plenty of water on my brush to complete the section. Just had to top that up because I actually did tap my brush a little bit drier just before I started this. So there's lovely. So down here I'm going to add plenty of colour. Picking lots up with my brush, a little bit more from the colour, from the actual paint itself, so it's darker. So it would be quite dark there. But then I'll add a little bit of water and start to just pull that colour out and try to get it to fade, which means I'm going to get rid of some of it, add some water and start to work with it. First time I've used these brushes to do something like this actually with this brush. So it's lovely, but I'm going to go back and add some darker spots here and there. Just let them bloom and blossom. I love watching watercolour do this. It's one of my favourite things to do. It's very calming and very fun. To do it with different things like India ink or rubbing alcohol, metallic colours. It's really fun. So as it dries back in intensity. But I do want to go back here and just see if I can do something about that line and get it all to just blend in that little bit more. A little spot there, there, there. Just needs a bit of touching up, and there's a little bit of colour needed there. And then I'm going to just take some of this. While this is wet, I'm going to stipple it on across that edge and see if I can get this to just flow out that little bit more and disguise that line and soften it in this kind of way. May not be the way that watercolours are recommended, but I'm using my pencil almost like I'm sketching with the tones and shades and everything else, just to get some interest going here and just a bit more clarity and brightness in the colour. Especially here, it's a lot lighter in this area. I'd like it just that little bit darker. So I'm just going to use really strongly, quite a high saturation of colour, just to fill this in here, where there would be shadows perhaps, and then just let it drift down into that damper area and just do its own thing there, perhaps using quite a light colour just to wet it and just to help to bring all of that down again. So just clean my brush out and pop this to one side. Close my watercolours up. Put the pot of water out of my way before I start tidying up and everything. This will take a little while to dry, but you can see how that colour helps to lift the drawing off the background. I prefer to do this at this point of time with this kind of art than to add colour to all of it, because the line work, the black and white line work, pen work, the ink drawing lifts up from that background. Background adds that interest, but even though it's very brightly coloured, it doesn't detract from the brighter black, white and grey of the drawing. Just one more thing left for me to do, and I'll do that with my O3 pen, is to put my initials here and the date. So it's 2024, it's June. I believe it's the 14th, I'm correct. And I'll just pop that there and I will create like a little strange kind of stonish kind of thing here, as if the stones tucked underneath, or just hammered out of the edge of this. And I quite like that. It'll do. So this will go into my sketchbook. I was tempted at one point to try putting metallic dots or patterns on that blue, and I know that my ability to use a brush to do that is limited, and I do have pens, dip pens and metallic gel pens and the like. Tell you what needs that blue, I think, is this area behind there, doesn't it? I'm not going to do it now. Behind this bit, I think that would look rather good. I'll do that once everything's dry and I finish this, because it is over an hour. But even though this background isn't a perfect gradient watercolour wise, I like the variation in it, I like the texture in it, and part of me wants to pick that out in some way, whether it's with a white pen, a paler bluey turquoise pen, or whether it's in black or gold metallic. I don't know, but it almost looks like this has got fragments in it as well, which would make me quite happy, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But before I do anything, this has got to dry, because whatever I put on there, if it's wet ink, I don't want it to bleed into the colour. Watercolours will always react with water. They do tend to stick to the paper once they've dried properly, but you can still lift them up with use. So I just want to leave this and see what happens. So thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know we had a very quick catch up, but please take what you wish from this, try it out, see what happens, change things in the way you'd like to see them. Part of me thinks I could have added some more frothy stuff here, sort of like these kind of mocha-ish things, or, ferns or something else, or leaves coming off there, but I didn't. There's nothing stopping me going back in with a black pen and doing that once this is dry. So thank you for joining me. I hope to see you more regularly. Depends on my energy levels and life in general. But for now, find time to be creative. Take care. Till the next time. Hwyl fawr. Bye bye. Take care.